Here. Welcome, everybody. Microphone problems. Okay. Welcome. How's everybody?
Way of freeing herself from.
All righty. Well, I'm excited because baseball, supposedly tonight, finally, for those baseball fans, tonight's the night. I'll be watching Yankees, Nationals, and maybe Dodgers and whoever they're playing. So if you're watching, I'll be watching too. There's a chance, though, the Nationals get rained out. It's been raining at night, so which would be very disappointing after this kind of a wait. But all right. So today we're going to talk a little bit about management teams, getting the most out of them, exiting them, how not to get sued, all that good fun stuff around people. So let's start with management team and getting them, aligned and getting the most out of them. The first element that you need to, and you'll hear us say this on a lot of topics we hit, is you need to be clear about your strat. Oop, hello.
Absolutely.
Oops.
Oh, that instead of a bath or a swallow.
Let's mute Julie so we don't. Oh, she got muted. Okay, cool. Somebody did it. The first thing you need to do is get clear about your strategy. I'm reminded of the Alice in Wonderland and the Cheshire Cat. So Alice is going down the path and there's a fork in the path, and the Cheshire Cat is there in the tree. And she says, "Cheshire Cat, which path should I take?" And the Cheshire Cat says, "Well, where are you going?" She goes, "Well, I'm not sure, actually." He goes, "Then it doesn't matter which path you take." Well, the same thing's true of your strategy. If you are not clear about where we're going, when you come to make a decision, a fork in the road, or maybe 3 or 4 options, you don't know which one to take. So job one on getting the most out of your management team, funny enough, is all the way back to having a really clear strategy of where you're bringing the business. So if it's, we're going to dominate the U.S. market. I'll give you an example. I had a real simple one. In one business I ran, I made humidity instrumentation. So we measured humidity. We made control systems for that. And we said, I had a very humble goal, is global domination of humidity measurement. That was my goal. So it was only about a $200 million market. I had like 30 million at the time. It wasn't a crazy thing to think I could make that happen over, a couple of years. So really clear on where you're bringing the business. That's number one. But then the second thing is, and this is where first, a lot of us go wrong on that. We are not clear about what we're trying to do with the business, building that mafia offer and building on the basis of competition. And let me go back on the strategy for a second. When you're thinking about a strategy, you have to pick the basis of competition on which you're going to win. So we've talked before that there are 3 bases of competition. You can either be low cost, you can be product innovative or service innovative. We have the newest, coolest, sexiest stuff. Or you can be customer intimate, which is to say we understand the customer problem better than they do, actually. And so we can solve that problem in a really effective way. It may end up being that your customer intimacy still has innovation around it, right? Like, it doesn't mean you're not innovative, and it doesn't mean you don't have a good price. In fact, if you really understand the problem, you may be the best value solution for somebody. You may be the cheapest solution because you get the problem so effectively, right? So you got to pick, though. Are you going to be the cheapest? Like Southwest, everything they do is about being cheap. Are you going to be the most innovative? Think Apple, 3M, when you think that. Or are you going to be customer intimate? Think Ritz-Carlton. And I got a whole story about Ritz-Carlton I could tell about, I'm going to pull like a Sally Fields here and go, you get me, you really get me, right? But that's Ritz-Carlton. When I go there, they get me. They remember me. They love me. It's super cool. So Four Seasons is excellent too. So pick the basic competition, know where you're going. But then here's the hard part. You need to boil your objectives down to 3 things. All right. And by the way, that's a joke from my prior company. Every time I'd say, you got to remember three things, I do. You got to remember three things just to see who's paying attention. But really, three things. So this is a Larry Bossidy thing. He says, look, people can't remember more than three things. Jack Welch did the same thing. So I'll give you the example. Jack, when he was around, was running GE, and he said, we're going to globalize the business. We're going to drive to services, and we're going to deploy Six Sigma. That was it. When he was in a locomotive factory, when he was in a light bulb factory, was in an appliance factory, a medical imaging facility, three things: globalize the business, drive to strategies, deploy Six Sigma, period. And he probably got sick of saying it, right? Because he probably said it like 10,000 times. But like advertising people will tell you, just at the point that you are completely sick of saying it, you can't stand to say it one more time, is when people will just begin to understand it. So you have to go way past that. Like I can't make those words come out of my mouth one more time. By then people will begin to get it. You'll begin to hear it back at you, and then you'll know that it's stuck. Okay. So you got to boil it down to three things. Three primary. We call that the focus three at the CEO project. When we work with CEOs, we spend a lot of time building your focus three, and only three things. Now, you might have 10 things you want to get done, and that's okay, because many of us are complex thinkers, and we go, we play chess, right? So I know I'm going to make this move, this move, this move, this move, and that ends me up in this crazy cool place. You cannot share all six moves with your company. You cannot do it. You cannot do it. You cannot do it, because they will not believe you. And the reason why they won't believe you is they don't think like you do. And they'll say, Debbie's out of her mind, right? I mean, like there's no way that stuff is happening, even though to her, it's crystal clear. She's like, I totally get that if we do A, B, and C, D's available, which means we can do E, which means we get to this neat place. They won't understand. Some might. Let me be fair. Some might. On average, people won't get it. And so be really careful. Three things. So you got to pick the three things that are first and hammer them hard. So now let's go to your executive team. When you look at the objectives for your executive team, they should have three things. I only need you to get three things done today. Now, ideally, all three of those things link directly to the three things that are critical to the business, right? So I'm trying to remember. Mine was one business I ran. I did, okay, this is stupid, but make the numbers. It's important that we make the financial results. Reduce cycle time. That was our moniker for improved quality, improved performance, reduce cycle time. I think it's the single biggest metric of a good process is fast cycle time. And the third was, I don't remember. It was a couple of years ago, but there was a third, I promise you. And I would just hammer the heck out of those three things, make the numbers, reduce cycle time, and whatever number three is. And all of my executive team, when I looked at their objectives tied to either reduce cycle time, make the numbers, or whatever the heck number three was, right? When Jack went to his presidents of his businesses, if their objectives didn't tie directly to deploy Six Sigma, globalize the business, drive to services, then he would have questions for them, okay? Now, to be fair, like the salesperson has probably got a big hit on make the numbers, right? The ops person is probably longer on reduce cycle time, yeah? And maybe the third is introduce some cool products. Let's say that's the third. That might be more your VP of engineering or your CTO that more owns these things, but you can't tell me that make the numbers doesn't hit everybody, for example, right? If I don't introduce the products, I can't create the new revenue, which means I won't make the numbers. If the operation isn't running effectively, so forth. Like not running it at cost, so my controller's involved in it, or my CFO's involved. So you want to be really tight. Three things for the company, they translate to the three things for executive team. Now, having said that, I did talk before about at the executive level, I want go forwards. Bob Walters calls them power forwards. But I need to see one or two things a year where you permanently increase the capacity of this organization to execute. A permanent increase in the ability to execute. So that could be re-engineer the supply chain process. That step function improvement in how we do supply chain, right? It could be re-engineer how we launch new clients, like Mark was doing that in the last year, and they made a step function change in how they deploy new clients. And now that has benefited the whole organization and will for years going forward, right? That was a step function improvement in the business. So not something that backslides, but a real change that will carry forward, okay? So I say 3, I might sneak a 4th, go forward project in on my executive team, okay? So keep it really tight. I don't want to see 10 objectives, because you know what you call an organization with 10 objectives? Let's say not very focused would be the probably nicest thing you could say about them, right? And I've seen executive teams that have 20 damn objectives, and I'm like, which one's the most important? And they go, all of them. I'm like, okay, then none of them are important, right? Because if all of them are important and there's 20, then none of them are important. So you got to pick. So now, and there's a sit down and a conversation, right, with each of your members. What are you going to get done? How's it tied to the 3 things? And most importantly, you want to set what we call SMART objectives with them. Y'all probably heard this before: specific, measurable, actionable, results-oriented, and time-based. So for me, really, it's measurable and time-based. The M and the T are the most important. So how will I measure? How will I know? And more importantly, if I died, if I got hit by a bus and a new CEO showed up, how would she know that you got that job done? That's the better question. Not how I will know, because I got insider knowledge, right? I mean, I kind of know you. I know what's going on. I know it when I see it. But what if somebody else showed up and Laura's the new CEO? How is she going to know you got that done? And if it isn't time-based and measurable, right, and specific, observable, it's not a useful goal. And many times you'll see goals like, and I even see it on resumes, by the way, managed the supply chain process. And I go, so what did that mean, right? There was no observable, measurable outcome, results-based outcome that I could see. So a good objective would be re-engineer the supply chain process with our goal of making numbers, right? It ties to that one. And I used to build a grid. Here are the 3 objectives. Show me how yours tie to each of those 3 items, right? So I had one page. I had my whole management team and what they were doing to contribute to the corporate 3 goals that we had. So supply chain, re-engineer the supply chain with the goal of reducing cycle time by 20% from 100 days average to 80, and reducing costs by 5%. And I'll do that by the end of Q3, right? I go, all right, I like that, right? I can observe it. Laura could observe it if she's our new CEO. You can see if it got done by the end of Q3. That's a great goal. Now, ideally, when they start planning that out, they've got some waypoints on their way to that Q3 20% reduction in cycle time and 5% reduction in costs. So when you sit down with them, and let's talk about the cadence on which you sit down with them. Generally speaking, if you only are down to 3, they are big rocks you're moving. It's not the little nit stuff in the business that they're going to do just to, remember what I said, by doing the job, you get a B. All that stuff is doing the job and just part of the B's. These are all moving the organization in a direction, right? So I don't need to sit down with my executive team very regularly because of that. Now, some people sit with them every week, and I'll go when you might want to do that. But on average, if you've got a competent management team that's been around the block a few times, you probably don't need to meet with them weekly. I'm going to say every other week, could be as infrequently as once a month. Having said that, hey, if they want to talk to you because they got a problem, 100%, anytime, right? I mean, you call me, I'm there to help. As part of that sort of servant leadership, I'm here to clear roadblocks for you. So every other week on big issues, and I would sit down and I pull out their 3 primary objectives, what they said they'd have done by the end of Q1. All right, how you doing? It's real simple. How you doing on 5%? Well, I got 2% done. I can see my way to another 3, another 2. I'm not sure where the last 1 is coming out. I'm like, okay, you got another 2 quarters. We got a little time on our hands. Anything I can do to help you? No, I think I got it. All right. You got it. No problem. How you doing on 20% cycle over time? I mean, it's a real easy conversation. I know exactly what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They know why it's important. And my goal is not to play gotcha, but to help them clear roadblocks in that conversation. So the way you get the most out of people is you define their backyard, you assume that they're competent, and all you do is help them. I'm not there to second guess you. I'll engage in a conversation around how we do things. I will admit this is not the most popular phrase in my house, but I do use it occasionally with my wife. I go, you can tell me what to do or how to do it, but you can't tell me both. And to some extent, that's true with your people, right? I can tell you what to do, but I probably should lay off on the how you do it if they're competent, right? I might say, if they tell me what they're going to do, I may give them some how to do, but I can't tell them what to do. It's their choice on what to do. So just be thinking about, if I'm telling them what to do and how to do it, why do I need them? Right? That's a sign of bad talent. When I'm in there doing what to do and how to do it every time, I go, you're just an intelligent set of hands and eyeballs at that point. I mean, you're not an executive if I'm telling you how to do your darn job, right? So be watchful for yourselves. For some of us that are control freaks, right? We may struggle with that issue, but I'm telling you, try to back off and just see what happens. What I find is that there's a dance between the people that work for you and you. And there's a certain amount of space available. And if you move in and suck up the space, they can only operate in this little remaining space, right? But if you pull back, you watch, good people will expand to fill the space. And you'll get more out of them by you backing off. Now, if they don't, it may say something about the individual. But if you suck the air out of the room, where are they going to go? So the only way to get them to expand their competency, expand what they want to do, is making room for them to do that. And as a control freak, that can be hard because trust, right? I will go back I said irregular meetings every 2 weeks, something like that, maybe even monthly, for competent people. But let's say I promote somebody and they are not fully competent in the job. I mean, I knew that when I promoted them, right? I mean, they are learning the job. That's the deal. They're brandy new. I mean, I wouldn't expect them to be perfectly competent. I might sit down with somebody like that more frequently, right? So, somebody who's brandy new, I might sit down every day the first week, and then maybe every 2 or 3 days for a while. But my goal is to get to my normal cadence with that individual once they and I think they're competent. So there are times that you're going to meet more frequently with somebody, right? That they're not competent in the job. They're new in the job. I need to spend more time with them on teaching them the ropes. But your goal should be get my butt out of there so I can do other things, right? I don't want to spend all my time working this person. The other place where you might spend more time is when somebody's in trouble, right? They're really struggling. Either they've got almost an impossible task, or they are not competent in the job and you are trying to coach them up to competency. So those people I might spend a little more time on as well. But if they're not brandy new or they're not being coached up to gain competency, then an irregular meeting should be enough if you got good people, okay? And you may want to look at your own team and like, do I feel like I have to sit down with this person all the time and they've been in the job 3 years? Like, why do I feel that way? Like, what's going on here? Do I have the right person in the job? Maybe they should have a different job. So it may be worth asking yourself if you feel like I got to meet really frequently. Okay. Measurable, impactable, blah, blah, blah. By the way, you should have your 3 main objectives too that tie to the big 3. This is, at these sizes, none of us are pure managers. Okay. Now, my goal in making the numbers, reduce cycle time, and introduce products may look a little differently than what other people are doing. I may be trying to find partnerships that can add products to our product line. I may be looking for acquisitions that can help Hello. Somebody started sharing the screen. All right. I think I'm going to stop that. There we go. So I may have different kinds of objectives, but I should have things that tie to those three too. Like I'm on the hook for that as well. If it's the corporate, if those are the three most important objectives. My objective shouldn't be over here when those are the three that matter to the company. So you all need to own it too. And by the way, you know, in an era of transparency, sometimes I tell the people that work for me how I'm doing on my three. Not just my board. I mean, sometimes I couldn't, but hey, here's how it's going. I'm looking at a couple acquisitions. I got three that look like they're close, two that told me to get lost. That's the way it goes. You know, there's nothing wrong with sharing how we're doing if we're in this together. Okay. Any questions about sort of how to set objectives, the cadence of meeting, how to gain clarity with your executive team? Because I think that's step one in getting the most out of them. Thoughts, comments?
I just talked to someone this morning who was whose team hadn't necessarily been cohesive over the years. And now that they have a COVID crisis, they are unified in their objectives and they're moving forward all with the same mission together to fix it. So the sense of urgency that COVID's provided has made a world of difference in the company's performance.
Wow. So because they went into crisis mode, like lost revenue, this is either perform or we die kind of thing.
Exactly. And they're holding each other accountable, and it's a good transformation.
I remember talking to one CEO who was CEO of a mattress company, and I asked him about the cohesiveness of his team, and he goes, "We're a 10, like no hesitation." I'm like, almost nobody says they're a 10, right? Particularly he was a couple $100 million. I'm like, why do you say that? He goes, well, we just brought the company through bankruptcy, right? And so when you go through war together like that, you're a 10 or you don't get out the other side. I'm like, okay, I buy that. So yeah, crisis can really, and by the way, you know, I talked about my one pager, right? So, you know, 3 objectives along the side. CFO has these things, you know, COO has these things, VP sales has these things, I would make that public. In fact, that's what drove our management team meetings. We'd sit down and we'd go, all right, boys and girls, how we doing? Right? I mean, we're gapped here. Okay. Hey, do you need help? Is there something we can do for you? Am I getting in your way? Okay. We're really ahead here. This is looking like a really strong piece. So while I said you want to talk about it individually, very quickly that becomes a collaborative document of how are we doing together. And, you know, for my money, the social pressure of you showing up to the exec team meeting when you know we're going to talk about how we doing on objectives and you didn't get it done is like super powerful. Like you don't even have to manage as a CEO anymore. You just let that person show up and tell their peers that they screwed up again. You get one, you might get two, you get the third time and they go, dude, like what gives? Like we're not going to make our numbers this year. We're not going to make our bonus because you're not performing. So what do we need to do to help you? I mean, it's very quickly turns to that. It's also one of the, funny enough, the powers of a CEO peer group. For those of you that are in it, you know this, you know, when that quarterly meeting's coming up and you're going to report out on how you're doing. And we do hold people accountable with scorecards. More work gets done in the week or two before the group meeting, maybe than the whole rest of the quarter sometimes, because you don't want to show up in front of your peers and say, yeah, I told you it was really important and I didn't get it done again. So just like it works in the peer groups, it should work in your executive team. So public visibility on how everybody's doing. Now you're going to end up being the one that, you know, hits them with the stick on that over the knuckles, but the social pressure can be really powerful as well. Okay. So when people are performing, this works. I've defined your backyard. I've defined how we're going to measure you. We all know whether you're making it or not. When people are A's, they kind of suck this up, right? They go, yeah, I'm going to do all that. And I'm going to do another 1 or 2 things that you didn't expect me to do, which is super cool when they roll in with a neat idea like that. let's say you got somebody who's a non-performer though. So let's go down that path for a little bit. And a couple of signs that you got a non-performer. Like I said, you're meeting with them. Oh, let me go back. Well, I can use it in this environment. You're meeting with them frequently, more frequently than anybody else on your management team, because you have to, or you lack the confidence that you're going to let them go for 2 weeks without talking to them because you're pretty sure they're going to make a mistake, a big one maybe. That's a competency comment. Another couple, and these are a little more on the soft side, which Pam will wonder how I ever figured that out. But one is they just suck the energy out of you, right? So anybody have someone in their life that when they show up, you're like, oh God, I got to deal with that person again. I mean, they just energy suck, like energy vampire, right? They're negative. They just can't get behind an idea. It's just rough dealing with them. That's a really negative sign. Those people are toxic in your organization. If you're feeling that as the boss, let me assure you, your organization is feeling it times 5 or more. Like they don't like dealing with that person either. And so watch for energy vampires and just look for your reaction when they walk into the room. If you go, hey, it's John, awesome, or you go, oh, it's Jim, damn, all right. I told him 30 minutes. Maybe I can get it done in 20, right? I mean, just so look for that. The other thing I look for beyond like spending a lot of time, energy vampires, is idea flow. So this is really relevant on executive level talent. If you have an executive where the idea flow, the creative is always this way, always me to them. And like, I go, hey, they go, oh, I'm stuck. You go, well, what about this? 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 And they go, oh, okay, got it. And then they go off and maybe they do it. But once in a while, they got to show up with ideas that you didn't think of, right? I mean, theoretically, they're spending all their time thinking about their functional area. They should be able to come up with some things you wouldn't have thought of, hopefully. And so I'm not saying it's got to be 80% inbound, 20% outbound, but 50-50. Right? You are blessed with more experience, background, knowledge, skills. You got a little advantage in this game of idea flow, but just look at idea flow of the people around you. If they're not generating new ideas, and not crazy, silly, but like viable, we may choose not to do it, but viable ideas, then just ask yourself, why is that? Why am I the one that's obliged to come up with all the answers and all the ideas in this relationship that I'm having with this person? Okay. So are you diving in? Energy vampires, idea flow. Those are 3. And then the last one is, frankly, diving in and doing their job. I'll give you an example. We had a CEO that he was a very, very strong financial guy. This guy was, I'm going to go almost super genius with numbers in his heads. I mean, he was really strong. Bob Walters knows Tito. He had a CFO where every month he had to go dive in and redo the numbers because there were mistakes every month. And I'm like, Tito, why the heck are you diving in and doing the controller's job, cleaning up the books every month? He goes, it's no big deal. It's not that hard for me. I'm like, that's not the question. The question is, why are you doing it? Why aren't those numbers right the first time out? Everybody makes mistakes once in a while. I get that. But like every month, multiples, significant. So he was actually diving in and doing the job. Sometimes this happens with salespeople. If you're a good salesperson, you dive in and you go win all the business because they can't do it, so forth. So look for, am I diving in and doing the job? And this is a place where a peer group is helpful, because sometimes these behaviors, we don't even notice that we're doing them. We just do it because it's comfortable. Generally, it's where your expertise is, by the way. So where I'm really, really good, I don't mind diving in and doing sales. I'm good at it. I mean, why not? But you're crutching the organization. You're not forcing that person to come up to competency level when you do that. Just to finish the story on Tito, we had a meeting at his offices in Frisco. That's just outside of Dallas. And he brought the management team in over lunch, which we do sometimes. And we met the CFO, we met the other people, and he had rated this guy a B player. We talked to him, but They leave, the management team leaves the room. As the door is clicking shut, almost in unison, everybody in the peer group goes, "You got to fire that guy." He's like a D minus. And a couple of months later, he fired him, and he's like, "Oh my God, my life got so much better as a result of that." He got a really capable person. He didn't have to dive into the numbers. He could focus on what he was good at. So look for, am I diving in and doing the jobs? Those are signs of, I got a talent problem. So mistakes, diving in, energy vampires, idea flow. Well, and I give you the last one. I'm actually dealing with somebody like that right now. Excuses or results? Which one do they give you? Right? Excuses or results? Top performers don't give you excuses. They'll give you results. In fact, their excuse goes like this. They go, "Hey, that didn't work out because I screwed up. But tell you what, I've already called the person, blah, blah, blah. I fixed it." And a great example of an A or somebody in this space is software coding, right? A B player goes, "Hey, I found a bug in the software, so I put it in the register so it could get fixed in the next cycle." That's a B. Did their job, right? An A player goes, "Hey, I found a problem in the code. I fixed it, and then I went back and changed the system so that won't happen ever again." Totally different kind of response to the problem, right? So are you getting excuses or are you getting results? That's another thing to look for. So let's say you're going down that path. Somebody's not working out. I'm all about coaching them. You know, I will go to my grave, people saying he didn't fire people fast enough. I'm okay with that. I think we probably all are, right? It stinks to fire people. So job number one is, can I coach this person up to competency, right? Is there, and generally speaking, we talked before about skill and will. I can coach skill, I can't coach will. I can coach skill, I can't coach will. So is it that they lack knowledge and understanding of what's going on? That's skill, right? So I can coach that, I can teach them. If the will is wrong, meaning I always wanted to be an interpretive dancer in Hollywood, and I'm a controller in a, dog food manufacturer in Ohio, and I'm really unhappy because of that. I'm like, I can't coach you to make you happy with that difference, right? That is an impossible delta for me to overcome. Either you have to decide in your head that I'm happy doing that for a bunch of reasons, or you got to go, right? So think about it. Are they not performing because of skill or will? One's fixable, one is not, okay? So coaches first. The second is there a job in this organization that the person can do? Now, I don't mean the big company, I'm transferring Bob over to accounting and getting him out of my department and then he's somebody else's problem. I don't mean that, move them, because in your companies, they're still your problem. Doesn't matter where you move them to, right? But is there a job they're better suited to? I've seen people that tried to be sales people that were really better suited to be analysts. I mean, they were really smart. They had good business chops. They just weren't good salespeople. So we moved them into a more like a marketing analytics job, and they were super happy and did a great job. I will tell you that the problem with this idea is ego. Ego and money. Let me say two things, right? So I take somebody who's my VP of sales and I want to move them over to, a salesperson, right? Normal salesperson. I go, here's the problem. I'm not paying you what I paid you for VP of sales. You can make a lot of money as a salesperson, but you're not going to make the same money. And that's the money problem. And then the second is the ego of, I had this big title and now I don't. And some people can wrap their heads around it and some can't. Some say they can't. Wow. We're getting a medical procedure, Joe. Some people can wrap their heads around it, some can't. Sometimes they say they will, and really you could put a clock on them. They're going to leave your company because their ego can't take the reduction in title. Okay. But move them to another job is a viable option. It works some of the time. I'm going to put it under 50%, but it can sometimes work. And then the last one is to exit them. Okay. And, that stinks, but the place I come from on that gave me comfort is there is a perfect job and company for everybody. It just may not be in this organization. And so the crime is to keep somebody in a job that they can never be successful in an organization they can never be successful in, where they're never going to get another promotion. They'll never do any fun work. To keep them in that job is the crime. To help them go find something where they can be happy and productive, that's the gift. And so maybe it's a justification in my own brain, but it worked for me when I thought about it. I said, look, and shockingly, I've had one or two, it's not that common, but people that wrote me afterwards and said that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I opened up my own company, or I found this amazing job that I'm super happy at, or whatever, or I realized that I was in the wrong industry, or, you know, that happens once in a great while where you'll move somebody out and they'll be okay with it. So let's go down the, how do you do this? Rule number one is you got to treat them with respect. The primary reason why you're going to get sued is they felt like they were disrespected in the exit process. Okay? If you treat them with respect and integrity, your probability of getting sued goes down a bunch. So what does that mean? You know, it's not the whole, it's not you, it's me. It's not that whole dump your boyfriend or dump your girlfriend thing, right? It's being direct with them to say, look, we had the conversation about the objectives of this job. They were measurable and observable. I worked with you a ton. We both knew you weren't making it, and we're now having a very uncomfortable conversation as a result of that. But you should have let them know ahead of time that if they don't get better at some point, they could be terminated. One of the questions I would ask when somebody said, I want to terminate somebody, I got one question. If I walked down the hallway right now and I went to Sharon and I said, Sharon, do you know that you are within 2 minutes of being fired? What's she going to say? And if the answer is she probably wouldn't expect it, then the manager didn't do their job, or you didn't do your job if they work for you, right? If the answer is she wouldn't be happy, but she'd know it was coming, then you did your job and you can fire them. Okay. But people need to know it's coming. You cannot surprise somebody with a termination. You got to give them that chance after chance, the coaching. They know that they're at risk. So when you finally have that bad conversation, they go, all right, yeah, I kind of knew this was coming, right? No surprises. That's first thing. That's respect. That's respect and integrity. Okay. The second is you're going to pay them when you exit them. I don't care what the employment contract is. I don't care what your practice is. You got to have to pay them on the way out. At executive level, I'm going to say the absolute minimum number is 3 months base salary. It should be 6. And why? Because it's going to take them a certain amount of time to find another job. What I'm trying to do is bridge you from here to your next job. And for a senior level position, it might take a little more than 6, but you know, I'm not going to give you 2 years of salary to go find a job. It's a rational period. Okay. Another thing that people will do is you have a requirement to provide COBRA. Sometimes they'll pay COBRA too, so they don't have to worry about healthcare. That's a nice thing to do. It's not real expensive. And it's sort of, my family and me will be okay, at least for a period of time. So having said that, in exchange for me paying them, I'm going to make them sign some documents. Okay. Number one is if it's not already in their employment contract, non-compete. Again, we talked about that before, narrowly drafted, or when it's not enforceable. In California, don't bother signing them because none of them are enforceable, unfortunately. Having said that, there are companies that sign them and hope that people just honor them, even though legally, if it ever went legal, you wouldn't get them to hold up. But sometimes people will deal with integrity and they say, hey, I signed something. I'm going to just, even though the law doesn't support it, I'm going to act that way. So it might be worth it, but legally there's no basis. A non-solicit is a nice thing to get if you can, particularly at a senior level. And when you write that, it's non-solicit of my clients that you were dealing with and non-solicit of my employees that you worked with. Generally, you got to put a timeline on that, 1 or 2 years. you can't put a 5-year non-solicit and a 5-year non-compete. It's going to be a limited period. Confidentiality, obviously, most of us have those in place. And the other one that's fun to, two other pieces that are fun to put in there, a non-disparagement clause is always a good one, meaning you're not going to talk mean about us. And by the way, generally you can do that mutual. I'll agree not to talk mean about you, right? So I won't say that guy was a blankety blank, no good for nothing, and I fired his butt, and I should have done it sooner. No, we'll say, hey, Bob was here, he did good deeds, he's looking for other opportunities. Period. Now, we all can read between the lines. We know Bob got fired, right? But we're not going to say that, right? And then the most important clause is the release of liability. Your lawyers will help you draft this up. Basically, they say, in exchange for the severance, I agree to release you from all claims. I'm not going to sue you. The other element here is you want to pay that severance over time. So if you're going to give them 6 months, you don't stroke them a check for 6 months severance. You pay them whatever your pay period is, every 2 weeks, every month, every week, whatever your pay period is, out through 6 months. Because if they do bad deeds, like they begin to solicit people or they begin to compete, the money stops that second, right? You got a little bit of a lever here to help inspire them to behave in a proper way, which is the residual money that's out there.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah, I was going to open it up. Questions, comments?
I just was going to add to your point on the reason to also string it out over time is because it's intended to be a bridge, not a windfall. Yeah. And so a lot of times I've seen them structured where when an individual accepts new employment, the pay stops. So it's intended to, I mean, they can be structured a lot of different ways, but for a lot of companies, it is intended to be a bridge versus a windfall. So that's just another way you could get some scrape on the back.
I never went for those. I know companies that do, and I had a buddy who was, it's like my butt. There's an old movie called Love American Style. It's about these 4 guys that got divorced and they're paying alimony, and the alimony stops when the ex-wife gets married, right? So they come up with the scheme that they'll like rotate one position, and the other guys will marry, guy number 3 will marry guy number 4's wife, and guy number 2 will marry guy. And so they're dating, trying to get these women to marry them just so they can get the alimony to stop, right? So it reminds me of that, like, please get married so my alimony can stop. But I never put those clauses in place. I'm like, if the person gets a job quick, God love them, they get a little windfall. But yes, that is 50% of the time people put that clause in. But then you gotta kind of count on them to self-report it, don't you, Julie? Like, hey, I got a job.
I mean, yeah, you do. I'm just saying that it sets a tone more broadly because word always gets out on how things are structured. It sets a very different tone than line up a brand new job, take your 6 month or plus severance, which it depends on the industry. Obviously, I think depending on how much movement around the industry exists anyway, I just think the intent is a bridge.
Yeah, it is. You're right. You're right.
Also helps with non-disparagement and cooperation during a transition of executives.
Keeping the money flow. The other cheap, and this is at the most senior level, is a little outplacement service. Can be a little bony. It doesn't cost a lot of money, 5-10 grand. There are a couple of firms that do this. You just engage for 3 or 6 months with a firm. They'll help them write their resume. They'll help them do the job search, figure out what they want to be when they grow up. It's not a lot of money to avoid being sued. So, but the biggest single one is pay severance and get a release against the severance. Those would be the 2 critical things. You also want to give them enough time to have it reviewed by counsel, by their attorney. Because if you walk them into the termination meeting and you go, sign this, and you got 12 minutes to sign it, or I'm pulling the offer back, that could very easily be interpreted as, what do they call it? Under duress. I was forced to sign this document, even though I didn't really want to sign it, right? You got to give them a week to review it. By the way, you don't pay them anything during that week. So there's a little money pressure that once you sign, then I start paying. I'm not going to pay till you sign. But you got to give them a little time to review it, and so that and it's really for you more than them, because if they later say, I felt like I had to sign it, you go, whoa, whoa, whoa. I told you to take a week. I told you to get it reviewed by an attorney. You didn't have to sign it. You chose to, right? And if they're rational, educated people, you're pretty well protected on that one. Okay. So about that, last thing on termination. When you do the termination meeting, you need a prover in the meeting. And I would generally use my HR lead to be the person in the room. Those meetings are short and sweet. You go, hey, Bob, didn't want to have this conversation, but here we are. I'm afraid today I'm going to have to terminate you. We've had conversations about the performance and so forth. And so today's going to be your last day. After this, I want you to clean out your office. You can say some goodbyes, but you need to be out of the building in a couple hours or end of the day or so. Generally a couple hours. When they go, well, but wait, I don't understand. Why are you terminating me? Look, I was really trying to do a good job. I thought I was getting better. You go, I'm not having that conversation. Time for that is over. We're not going there. Refuse to engage in any of the, I wish I didn't have to do this, or I really thought I was getting better. This is simply I'm going to inform you that you are done, period. That is the only objective of that meeting. Nothing else. And you want your prover in the meeting in case somebody says that something else was said in that meeting. That's why the prover's there. If it's just you and Bob, Bob could say, Jim said if I did X, Y, Z, he'd keep me on, and I found that unethical, and that's why I had to go, right? I'm like, it's me and Bob. I can't prove what the heck got said, right? But if I've got Andrea in the meeting, and Andrea has documented it, we got a prover that says that is not how that went down, right? So that's why I always had, Andrea is one of my HR leads. That's why I'm using her name. But so have a prover in the meeting. Even if it's a Zoom, I had somebody who was going to terminate somebody over Zoom in today's environment. I'm like, on that Zoom call, there's two of you. So bring your whoever is the right person to be your prover and the person you're terminating on the Zoom call, okay? So they know that there's another person observing. It'll help keep the behavior right. Generally speaking, I would give them the news, and then I would exit, and I would let my HR people do the paperwork processing, so that there's no more, why is this happening, higher level conversation. It's just doing paperwork at that point, right? The out processing paperwork, including handing them the contract that you, and I would give them that. You have time to review this. There's a generous severance in there. There's outplacement assistance. We're going to take care of your COBRA, but we are asking for a few things in exchange. Okay, so but take your time, look at it. You don't have to sign it, but if you don't sign it, I'm not going to pay you severance. Be really clear. So then they're out. The other thing to be careful of in today's environment is you got to cut off their IT access. I'll tell you my most embarrassing, stupid Jim story. I was doing a layoff, and we had a meeting with the executive team about, shutting off access to the network first thing in the morning. And so all the people that were going to be terminated, I had IT turn off their access that night, like at midnight. I roll into the office at 8, and one of the people in that meeting was my VP of sales, who I was going to terminate, right? Because he wasn't doing a very good, part of our problem was he wasn't doing a very good job. So I was going to terminate him. And unfortunately, he got in at 6 o'clock. Couldn't get onto the network. And then he talks to another guy who he knows is going to be terminated. He goes, hey, you having trouble getting on the network? Yeah. He goes, uh-oh. So when I roll in at 8 o'clock, he rolled in at 8:01 right behind me going, all right, let's do this. That was a very stupid, Jim, bad story, but I couldn't let him have access to the network, right? So just be a little thoughtful about how you do it. I obviously blew it. There's probably a smarter way for me to do that, but people can do a lot of damage in 5 minutes if they know it's coming, right? Put a virus on the network, put malware on the network. All kinds of bad things can happen in a very brief period of time. So you need to protect yourself. So a lot of this was about how not to get sued. Here's the real answer. You're going to get sued. It's going to happen. You're going to get sued. There are, and for me, I lay this on, there's an excess of lawyers, right? There's an old joke that goes, there's one lawyer in town, he starves. There's 2 lawyers in town, they get rich. And that's sort of what it is. We have so many lawyers that they will take marginal cases. So even if you did everything right, you treated the person with integrity and respect, and you paid them, and they signed a release, there are still lawyers that will take that case and they'll claim that Bob was over 50, or Bob was in another protected class, or Bob had a hidden disability that you didn't know about, but he's still in the category, and you will get sued. And your only protection is your documentation of the process that you followed, of you didn't make the numbers, you coached them, you worked with them, they understood it, and the final termination, and then the way you treated them, and then the release at the end. You're still going to get sued. But having your documentation in line, that you did it right, helps a ton in terms of not having to pay anything out. You will have to pay for lawyers, but you probably won't have to do a payout. So that was a heck of a lot of stuff kind of blowing and going about holding people accountable. What do you do if they're not making it? Difference between A's and B's. Any questions? Maybe starting at the top, sort of holding a team accountable and getting the most out of them. We could start there. Any comments or thoughts, or people that screwed it up and want to share it? Or
Hey, Jim, I would like to share a story. I mean, one of the great guys, I mean, very smart, intelligence, VP level guy, is a technocrat and kind of created some tools, automation tools for us and everything, but he wanted to start his own company. So basically, and he worked for 2.5 years, which added a lot of value and just doing a lot of business. But once I started asking, I want to be a stock or shareholder, I want shares, I want to profit sharing with the business I can build and all this stuff. And that was pretty much what he built was saturated, and just we don't need him anymore. But kind of we didn't give an opportunity. We approached the competitor, and the competitor is a small company. They accepted him and said, we open a new business unit. You will give you this much of partnership in that business unit and all those whole 9 yards. So he started approaching our employees whom he trained or worked in the past. So just then they hired one sales guy and other guy. They started approaching, and we came to know this. Then we filed a lawsuit. I mean, just kind of not a lawsuit technically, because we know that he's a new and just kind of threatened like shit. Just it's like hell. I mean, just big letter, big attorney, and just wrote we know that it's not going to go anywhere, but just kind of to scare him and enter his parent company and all this stuff. It went, and end of the day, I mean, those kind of things. I mean, just we ended up having 2-year non-compete afterwards with both the companies, and kind of because we had the money power and just we spent a few $1,000s, but it worked better,
yeah.
Much better.
Yeah, sometimes the scary lawyer letter is enough to enforce a contract like that, right? And any other questions or comments about holding people accountable? Somebody thinks you're doing a great job. Somebody thinks they're doing a crappy job. That is willing to share.
I have a question to ask. The question is on your 3 objectives. Do you always have to make your numbers?
In that particular company, if I wanted to keep my job, yes. But no, you don't have to. No, lots of, like you heard the 3 for Jack Welch. It was drive to services, globalize the business, and deploy Six Sigma. None of those are make the numbers. So I think at GE, if you don't make your numbers, like it's a problem. But you know, it's a choice of culture, right? You say, is it more important to achieve certain strategic things, and I believe the numbers will come, right? Or do I actually want to elevate it to a level that it's one of my critical objectives? I'll give you an example. If I had just bought a company and I was fairly highly levered, I had a bunch of debt, I sure as heck would have make the numbers as one of my 3, because otherwise the banks are going to be all over me. if I was low debt and we were growing and it was more about strategic stuff that would get us where we need to get, I might not have it there. So I think it's a choice, Larry. It is a choice. So
Thank you very much.
Hey, Jim, if I could, I would recommend still, though, making some type of metric that's different than a number. So again, even if Jack Welch said, expand Six Sigma, he still could have said, I want to roll it out to 50 groups this year or whatever.
yep.
Because without a measurement, it becomes really hard. And the second thing I would say is people got to be smart. You got to build a case. It's got to have numbers. It's got to have things you can't argue with. And you can't be stupid. I was told to fire a guy that a month and a half before we had given him an outstanding performance review. We had given him a full bonus. He was the only guy to get a full bonus. And now the CEO's telling me go fire the guy. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
And so, and oh, by the way, I got four. I didn't do it, so I got fired, but that's a different issue. But he got fired, and he won a lot of money. Because again, you got to have a brain.
Yeah. No, I think, Scott, that's a really excellent point. When we'd go down the point of we're going to terminate somebody, I'd go pull their prior reviews, and if they weren't very middling kind of results on how you're doing every year, they get like that guy, he was untouchable. You can't give somebody an outstanding review and a full bonus and terminate them a month and a half later. That is just.
Yeah. Well, and even if you want,
that's like lawyers salivate for stuff like that, right?
But I mean, build your case. I actually said to the CEO, hey, has his performance slipped that much in the last 2 months? Because I haven't seen it. Yeah. And he just looked at me. And I'm like, okay, you have no real reason to do it.
Yeah, the only excuse on that would be he did something unethical, illegal, massive violation of company policy somehow. I mean, if it didn't look like that, you could build a case, but I could fire him in 6 months by building a case.
Exactly. I mean, I think we had said 90 days at one point, but yeah, you're right. You have to build a case. You have to give him the warning. You have to go through all the steps to make sure that it's not a surprise to anybody.
You got it. Yeah, Scott, and that not a surprise thing, which is an integrity thing, is also your file that you hand to your lawyer when you get sued. It serves two purposes.
Correct.
Any other thoughts, comments? Everybody's doing a stellar job of this, so you're all quiet. You're like, yeah, we all knew that. We knew all of this, Jim. It's all cool. Like, thanks.
Too busy taking notes, Jim.
Or that. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. I want like 2 pieces of good news before we leave. People have to volunteer. Something going. 2 people to tell one good thing going on in their life or their world or their. I'm not going to be like the Good News Network, but 2 people or 3. I'll do 3. 3 pieces of good news. Who's in?
We signed Mookie Betts.
What? Oh yeah, Boston. Yeah.
Dodgers.
12 years, $365 million.
That's
unbelievable.
Good.
Yeah, congratulations. That guy's an epic player. Who else? Okay, Mookie Betts. He's happy. So are Dodgers fans. Who else? Come on. I can wait all day.
And so is Formula One.
What? Say again?
MotoGP and Formula One are back as well.
Formula One and MotoGP are back. Awesome. But no crowds, right?
3/4 of people don't care. No crowds. No spectator rate.
Okay, so all the Europeans are happy. Last one. Somebody. Anything.
Hey, NASCAR is starting to allow fans.
Say again?
NASCAR is starting to allow fans.
NASCAR is starting to let fans. All right, 3 sports ones. That works.
Make
all right, everybody.
Another left turn and another left turn.
I'm that happy. The Europeans don't care, but the Americans are happy. So there we go. Everybody got taken care of. Well, thanks, everybody. Appreciate you stopping in and investing some time. Hopefully that were a couple ideas for you, and we will see you next week.
Thank you. Excellent.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.